Okay, so just to say again, in case anyone didn't hear, this is the last year until after the holidays, please God. Um, so today we are doing Kuf Lamed Aleph 131. Actually prepared it a little bit and then re-prepared for today. Last week, because so if you want to know how I chose it, last week I thought that what I had prepared was good for half of a shiur. So I was looking for a short chapter of Tehilim, and I chose this kapitel by its length, three pasukim. And then I was quite amazed because we say it, we know it. It's actually one of the Shir Hamalosas, as we'll discuss slightly, and yet it's not it's not one that we know off by heart. I've not one that we come across and say all the time. I've been challenging myself to know Tehillim by heart because I did a lot of matric invigilation, and you're not allowed to do anything except stand and watch them. And you may not sit, you may not have a book, you may not have your phone, and in an hour and a half, you can really go nuts. So I was challenging myself to see how many chapters of Tehillim I know by heart, so that because no one can stop you from doing that, right? And this is not one of them that I know by heart. In fact, when I started preparing it, I said, I hardly recognize it. And not only that, I said, wow, it's got such important themes. There must be tons and tons and tons of Mefarshim on it, and there aren't. So I was discussing with Yossi today. I said, how come there isn't so much commentary on this chapter? And his thoughts are that it's because it comes so far at the end of Tehillim. People who give Tehillim Shurim don't ever reach there. He says that's why he thinks that's why there aren't tons of Mefarshim and explanation. I actually couldn't find a single online share of this for this chapter. I'm sure there are, but I couldn't access. I couldn't access any of them. So you got to wonder why. Okay, and that's so as we go through it, probably we'll see a little bit more why it is a difficult chapter. So as I mentioned, this is the 12th of the 15 Shir HaMa'alosas. We've spoken extensively about the Shir HaMa'alosas. I'm not going to go into that in any depth now. The 15 Shir HaMa'alosas, the 15 steps of change, the 15 steps leading up to the Beis HaMikdash. So we've spoken about that. So this is number 12 of the 15 of them. And so it begins off by saying, and I'm going to read it first, Shir Hamalos of David, a song by David for going up the steps of the temple. Hashem le'gava libi. Hashem, my heart is not arrogant. V'lai ramu einai, and my eyes are not haughty. V'lai hilachti b'gedolos, and I don't go into great things. V'nifla'is mimenu, all things that are too wondrous for me. And I'm going to carry on. Imloi for demamti nafshi. I calm myself, I wait for you, Hashem. Kagomel alai imai, like a nursing baby waits for its mother. Kagomel alai nafshi, my soul is like this nursing baby to you. And the third pasuk, Yachal Yisrael el Hashem. Yisrael waits for Hashem, Ma'atov ad olam, from now and forever. So it seems like three random psukim that got put together in one kapitel and called a chapter of Tehillim. So we want to understand not only what David HaMelech is saying, but the order of which he's saying and how these three psukim fit together. So here David is telling us simply, Pshat, he's telling us that he wasn't arrogant. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't pursue things that were too great for him, that were beyond him, and that's both in his physical life and in his spiritual life. So imagine this: David, who is the king of Israel, is David Melech Israel. He's the king of Israel. Chai v'kayam. He exists forever. From him is going to come Mashiach, and he says, "I'm not arrogant." And I didn't pursue things that were too great and wondrous for me. First thing that we're trying to understand. And so immediately the commentaries say David did not become arrogant as a result of the great things that happened to him. And the first Medrash says he didn't become arrogant, not after he managed to kill Goliath, not after he was anointed king, and not after he was a reappointed king after the rebellion against him, when he was like re-chosen as king of Israel. And none of these three big things made David become arrogant. Another medrash also on this pasuk says, "Legava libi," even though I was the youngest of all the brothers. So not only David was the youngest, but apparently he was not nearly as handsome as his brothers. He was not nearly as accomplished as some of his brothers, and he was chosen to be the king. So he said, even though I was the youngest of my brothers, I didn't look down on my brothers. I never thought of myself as greater than any of them, even when I was chosen to be king. V'lo ramu einai, my eyes didn't look up in haughtiness. Says the Medrash. After he killed Goliath, he should have been dancing and singing about his greatness and that he, little David, managed to kill this big giant. And what a good slingshot I am! I could have, I managed. I managed to do that, and yet he didn't have even a small ounce of arrogance over the fact that he killed Goliath. And the third thing, haughty bigdulas, and I didn't go with my greatness. So says the Medrash that David could have had all the rebels killed. He could have, if not killed them, he could have punished them greatly. Like, you can't just do what you want, get away with it, and he didn't. He didn't take revenge on all those people who went against him. And the third explanation on this concept of like gavalibi v'lei halachti is that David HaMelech is saying that even though I was the king of Israel, even though I was in the highest position, like physical position that there is, who I was and what I could do, I never took advantage of my position of David Melech Israel, of David the king of Israel. So we have to understand David's unbelievable greatness in this, because human beings are born with the instinct of pride. It's one of the things. And as soon as we see a person who doesn't have any self-pride, we feel bad for them. We say, like, shame, they have no self-confidence, and we send them for therapy, right? Got to go and figure out who you are and what you can accomplish. And on the other hand, we have to understand what pride really is, what is arrogance. And simply, says the Mefarshim, just to look at this very simple, that's the next pasuk that David says, I'm like a baby in my mother's, nursing baby in my mother's arms. This is the realization that every single thing we have of our own is not our accomplishment. It's not we did it, but Hashem gave it to me. Hashem gave me those strengths, gave me that money, gave me those talents, gave me whatever I needed, and that's why I was able to do what I'm doing. And then the connection with the third pasuk, which is Yisrael, look to Hashem from now and forever, because real humility, like Gavalibi, real humility is the understanding that everything comes from Hashem, and the turning to Hashem, to look to Hashem for abilities, again, for more and more talents, for more and more abilities, for more ways to do what we need to do. The Ben Ish Chai says that whenever a person feels an iota of pride, is in his words, he says, a taste of pride, you feel a little bit of arrogance, you should say this chapter of Tehilim, or at least this pasuk. And the Ben Ish Chai says that everybody should learn this first pasuk, like Gavalibi, right? That my heart is not arrogant. And when we're feeling pride, we should repeat this over and over again. And he says, physically, the arrogance will disappear. This is, and the Ben Ish Chai continues and he says, when we accomplish things, it's impossible not to feel pride over our success. So should we feel proud? Should we? And strangely, this is something we it's words we use so often. We say to our children, "We proud of you," right? Be proud of yourself, right? We use these kind of comments. So should we never feel proud of ourselves? Should we never feel proud of the things that we've accomplished or we've done? And the Ben Ish Chai says, yes, we are supposed to feel pride, but it's not supposed to be arrogance. And then the Ben Ish Chai talks about the difference between pride and arrogance. So he says that, points out to us that when Mashiach comes, this midah, this midah of humility, of the opposite of arrogance, is actually what is going to bring Mashiach. So he says that there are two things that we know that's going to bring Mashiach. The number one thing that's going to bring Mashiach is kindness, random acts of kindness, as it's been labeled, but just simple people being kind to one another. And the next thing, or side by side, is going to be humility. Humility is the thing that's going to bring Mashiach, and points out to us that when it speaks about Mashiach, it says that when Mashiach arrives, he's going to say to us, going to announce, and it's a pasuk that's now become quite famous, Anavim, Anavim higiaz man geulaschem. You humble ones, and that's the literal translation. You humble ones, the time of your redemption has arrived, has come. That's from the Yalkut Shimoni in Yeshayahu. Also in Zechariah, he tells us about Mashiach and says that when Mashiach will come, Ani reichev al chamer, like a poor man riding on a donkey. In other words, Mashiach himself is going to come to us with no arrogance, with no sense of pride. He's going to come Ani reichev al chamer, as if he was a poor man riding on a donkey. The story is told of the Chafetz Chaim that he was in some city, village. He went to give a talk, and a lot of extra people came. And when he arrived at the destination, he couldn't get through. He couldn't get from wherever he was parked. I don't know how they did in those days. Parked, came in a carriage, whatever, to get into the doors of the place that he was supposed to go. So one of his students stood next to him, and they put at that time the Chafetz Chaim was quite old. It was difficult for him to walk by himself, so they put him on a chair. I guess it was like a wheelchair, and they were pushing him through the crowd. And people were saying, it's the Chafetz Chaim, you move so that the Chafetz Chaim can come through. And the student who was standing next to him heard the Chafetz Chaim mumbling to himself over and over again. Yisrael Meir, that was the Chafetz Chaim's name. Here you're being pushed through because the people think that you're great and the people think that you're holy. But just remember, you got to ask yourself, what's going to be with you when you're in heaven, when the angels don't let you through and they don't know that you are the Chafetz Chaim that everybody is talking about here. And he said this over and over to himself to prevent himself from being over proud, from being over arrogant. Lots of the commentaries discuss what is arrogance and where do we see in the Torah how important humility is. And I was thinking that if we go through even just Tehilim, but when you go through Chumash and Tehilim and any other of our Sfarim, at least every second kapitel of Tehilim has something to do with pride, humility in it. And actually, right from the start, I think probably one of the first things that nursery school children learn about the Torah is that it was given on a little mountain, right? And one of the first songs that nursery school children learn is about the mountains fighting, and the line which I always laughed when my children sang when they came home, because they had no idea what humility was, but they sang the song and they all finished off by saying, and from this we learn that humility pays. And I so often ask my children, what is humility? Okay. And we're still asking, what is humility? We think now we're big and grown up, we know what humility is. We have a similar story where the Haman is about to be hanged, and the Medrash tells us that all the trees fought about which tree was going to have the merit of hanging Haman, right? And all the trees came forward and they all told why they should be the one that hangs Haman. And so the olive tree said, I should be the one that hangs Haman because from me comes the oil that's used in the Beis HaMikdash. And the esrog tree said, Van me Haman should be hanged because I have esrogim, which are part of the for part of the service in the Beis HaMikdash. And each tree came forward and explained why it was the tree. The pomegranate tree came forward, the nut tree came forward, and each one came and explained its greatness, what it is about that particular tree that makes it the one that should have the honor or the schus of hanging Haman, of hanging the Haman. And in the end, the Medrash says, the thorn tree was the one that was used for hanging Haman. And why is that? Because the thorn tree said, I might look great, I might be tall, I might have a thick trunk, but I'm a nothing tree. Nobody wants me, right? People use me maybe for decoration, but nobody wants to climb a thorn tree. Nobody wants to have thorn trees in their garden, right? I'm a nothing, no chance that I'll be rewarded with hanging Haman. And again, the Medrash says, from here we learn about humility. So what is humility? Then so the Torah tells us that there are three people in Tanakh who show us what humility is. And this is Avraham Avinu. Avraham was the one that when he announced, when he wanted something from Hashem, he said, Hashem, what a cheek I have to ask you. Don't be cross with me. And remember that he was asking at this point not for something for himself, but he was asking for the people of Sodom to be saved. And he said, Anochi afar va'efer, I'm but dust and ashes. And this says the commentaries, Chazal, this is a real declaration of humility. A little bit later on comes David HaMelech, or actually I'm skipping around, I think, not a lot later than Avraham is David HaMelech, and David HaMelech says about himself, I am a Teila'as v'lo ish. I'm like a worm, not a man. Okay, again, his declaration, says Chazal, of absolute humility. In between that comes Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu is famous for he was saying it about himself and his brother Aaron. He said, Nachnu ma, I am but what? And says the Torah, this is the greatest declaration of humility. And the Torah tells us, V'ha'ish Moshe anav mikol Adam. The man Moshe was more humble than anybody else. And that's really the lesson for us, the final lesson of what really is humility. Moshe Rabbeinu, the person who spent more than a month up in heaven, the person who brought us the Torah, the person who took the Yidden out of Egypt, and about him it says, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav mikol Adam." Moshe was more humble than anybody else. And this is because Moshe did not deny his strengths and his capabilities. Moshe knew that everything he had, everything he was able to do, comes from Hashem. The Kotzker Rebbe says that every person should carry in their pockets two pieces of paper. The one piece of paper should say on it, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. The whole world was created for me. My children had a tape that we used to listen to in the car every morning on the way to school, and one of the songs, the words were Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. For me, the world was created just for little me. And so whenever I say this pasuk, I have to say, just for little me, the world was created. Imagine what Hashem did. He created the whole world for me. And the other pocket should be a little paper that says on it, Anochi afar va'efer, I am but dust and ashes. And the Kotzker Rebbe says that the trick in life is to know when to take out which paper. He says most of us carry both of those papers in our pockets, but we take them out at the wrong time. And so when are we supposed to take out which papers? And Chazal explained to us with all different examples. I try to use a more modern day example. Is you go to a meeting and everybody has good ideas of what needs to be done, and then you say to someone in the room, "So will you take that on?" The immediate reaction is not "No, haven't got time for it, not interested." The immediate reaction is, well, "I wish, but I'm just not so good at that kind of thing." What are they taking out? Which paper are they taking out? They're taking out the Anochi off of Afer. I'm so humble. I can't do that, right? And then you have those people who, at times where they should be really humble, and they take credit and they take whatever for lots of stuff that isn't theirs to do. They're taking out the wrong paper, the Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam paper, at a time where they should be humble. And so our trick is not to say I can't do it and pretend we humble. I think when I was in matric, one of my set work books was Charles Dickens, which interestingly you might know it's been taken out of the syllabus. I asked the girls in class one day if they know anything about Great Expectations, and they had not even heard. Not only they had never heard of the book Great Expectations, they had never heard of Charles Dickens. But okay, so they're missing out such an important part of their education. No. But they will never meet Pumblechook. For those of you who do know Great Expectations, he was the most pompous little man, and he walked around all day saying, "I'm humble," right? I'm humble, and this is false humility, right? Where you've got to walk around all day telling people how humble you are. That's not humility at all. In a more kosher source than Charles Dickens, Lahavdil, in the book Sipurei Hasidim, it speaks about the Anav of Minsk. So there was a man who lived in Minsk, and he called himself the humble man of Minsk. And he stood by the bathhouse and he offered everybody who came in that he would wash their back. And everybody looked at him in wonder, this great Torah scholar who's offering to wash my back. And he said, "Of course not, but thank you. It's so amazing that you're offering." And one day, a Chassidish younger man happened to be in Minsk, and he went to the bathhouse. And at the door to the bathhouse was this man, um, looked quite a holy man, and he offered to wash his back. And so the guy said, "Yeah, thank you. That sounds good." And the Anav of Minsk became very surprised, wondered, and he turned to him and he said, "Really? You're going to let me wash your back? Don't you know who I am? I'm the Anav of Minsk, the humble man of Minsk." So we got to ask ourselves, what is real humility, right? Is it proclaiming your humility, or is it actually being humble? And this is what the Torah tells us. Va'ish Moshe Anov Mikol Adam, that Moshe was humbler, more humble than anybody else. Why was he more humble than anybody else? Because he knew he had greatness. He knew he had capabilities. He knew what he was able to do, and yet he wasn't pompous as a result of his greatness. He didn't try and avoid doing any of those things. He did them all, but without greatness. Um, why does he use this expression in the second pasuk? I'm quietly wait for you, Hashem, kagomel alai imoi, like a baby relies on his mother. So the baby has no arrogance in him at all. He knows that his sustenance comes from his mother, absolutely and completely. And this is what humility is again. And David HaMelech is saying, um, we need to know that everything we have, we need every capability, every talent, everything that we know how to do, we need to have those talents. Hashem has given them to us for a reason. And how should we see it? Just like when a mother feeds its baby, the baby needs those nutrients. And more than that, say the commentaries, just like a baby gets comfort, gets love, feels good about its mother holding it, feeding it, so that's how we should feel with Hashem. That whatever He's given us is like we feel embraced by Hashem's love. And yet, Chazal carry on and they say, sometimes a baby is really sad about its mother. She's coming quickly enough. She hasn't got enough milk right now. She isn't answering to his call immediately, or as immediately as the baby thinks should, and yet, okay, the baby has to wait for its mother. And Chazal tell us that this is how our relationship with Hashem has to be. We have to know that all our nutrients come from Hashem. And when we don't feel Hashem's embrace at that moment that we want it, it doesn't mean that Hashem doesn't love us. It doesn't mean that Hashem isn't giving us what we need and what we want. But we got to hold on for a minute. We've got to just wait, says David HaMelech. We've got to just wait, kagamul alai imai, like a baby relies on and knows that eventually its mother is going to feed it, and therefore says Yachal Yisrael el Hashem, that Yidden always have to turn to Hashem. Yidden always have to look to Hashem. We have to look to Hashem for our needs. Ask Him for our needs, ask Him for our talents, ask Him for our capabilities, and believe that it's going to come me'atar ad eilam, from now and forever. And Chazal finished this kapitel of Tehilim with a strong statement to us. They say, it says, Kol ma she'amar David b'sifrei, everything that David says in his book, in other words, in Sefer Tehilim, kenegdoi, it's about him, but the keneged kol Yisrael, kol ha'itim, amrei. But this is also, he saying it to all of us in Bnei Israel, all the time, for all times. So in other words, when we come across a kapitel of Tehillim like this, it's not just a remembering that David HaMelech was humble. It's not just reminding us how amazing it is that David HaMelech was humble, but it's in order that we should be humble also, and we should learn and we should say to ourselves, if David HaMelech, King of Israel, could be humble and say like Gava Libi, then we need to train ourselves and say like Gava Libi as much as we possibly can. And that brings us to the end of this kapitel.
Thank you, Rivki. That was wonderful. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
And you, and a good holiday for everyone.
Thank you.